The small spaceship trembled as it pierced through the stormy atmosphere of Zoreth Prime, a desolate planet cloaked in shadows. Captain Daniel Rice, a rugged human commander with a reputation for reckless bravery, gripped the controls tightly. The distress signal they had intercepted was weak but unmistakably urgent. "Stay sharp," Rice said, his voice steady but commanding. "We don't know what we're walking into." Beside him sat Lieutenant Harper, the team's tech expert, her eyes glued to the holographic map. "The signal is coming from that fortress up ahead," she said, pointing to a massive structure half buried in the rocky terrain. "It's heavily fortified." Rice nodded, his jaw tightening. He didn't like the look of the place. High walls, towers bristling with weapons, and a strange eerie glow emanating from its core. It screamed danger. But Rice had made a promise to respond to distress calls, no matter how perilous. "Prepare for landing," he ordered, his team of 4 gearing up. Their ship touched down in a hidden ravine, its cloaking systems humming softly. Rice stepped out first, scanning the area with his weapon drawn. The fortress loomed in the distance, and Rice could feel the weight of the mission pressing on his shoulders. The signal wasn't just any distress call. It was marked with the royal seal of the Zelfar Empire. The Zelfar were a proud and advanced alien race, and their royalty rarely called for help. Something serious was going on. "Move out," Rice whispered. His team followed, their boots crunching softly on the rocky ground. They approached the fortress under the cover of darkness, dodging patrol drones and motion sensors. As they reached the outer wall, Harper worked her magic, disabling the security grid with a portable device. "We're in," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The halls were cold and metallic, echoing with the faint sound of alien guards patrolling. Rice raised a hand, signaling his team to stop. He spotted a cell at the far end of the corridor, its energy bars glowing faintly. "That's where the signal is coming from," Rice whispered. They moved swiftly but cautiously, reaching the cell in seconds. Inside, a figure sat slumped against the wall. Rice activated a small scanner, confirming the identity of their target, Princess Sirona of the Zelfar Empire. "Princess," Rice said, his voice firm but respectful. "We're here to rescue you." The figure stirred, and piercing violet eyes locked onto Rice. Sirona was stunning, her royal features framed by a cascade of silvery hair, but her expression was anything but grateful. She rose to her feet with regal defiance, her shimmering gown a stark contrast to the cold prison cell. "You dare touch me?" she hissed as Rice deactivated the energy bars and stepped inside. Her voice was sharp, laced with outrage. "Do you know who I am?" Rice ignored her protests. Time was running out, and he wasn't about to waste it on formalities. He grabbed her arm gently but firmly, pulling her toward the exit. "Your Highness, we don't have time for this. If you want to live, follow me." Sirona's eyes blazed with fury, but she allowed herself to be led, her pride clearly wounded. "Uncivilized brute," she muttered under her breath. As they made their way back through the fortress, alarms suddenly blared. The enemy had discovered the breach. "We've got company," shouted Corporal Vega, the team's scout. Rice cursed under his breath. "Harper, take the princess to the ship. Vega, cover our 6. Let's move." The halls erupted into chaos as alien guards poured in from every direction, their weapons firing bright streaks of plasma. Rice and his team returned fire, their movements precise and calculated. The princess, however, seemed unimpressed. "You call this a rescue?" she snapped, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Less talking, more running," Rice barked. They fought their way through the labyrinthine corridors, each step bringing them closer to the exit. Just as they reached the outer wall, a massive explosion rocked the fortress, sending debris raining down. Rice shielded Sirona with his body, earning another scowl from the royal. "Unhand me, human," she demanded. Rice shot her a look. "You're welcome." Finally, they reached the ship, its engines already roaring to life. Harper helped Zerona aboard while Reyes and Vega provided cover. As the last of the team scrambled inside, Reyes slammed the hatch shut and shouted, "Get us out of here." The ship lifted off just as enemy reinforcements arrived, their weapons lighting up the night sky. Harper piloted them through the storm with expert precision, and soon the fortress was nothing but a glowing speck in the distance. Reyes leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Zerona stood nearby, her arms crossed and her expression icy. "This is how humans conduct rescues," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. Reyes smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're alive, aren't you?" Zerona said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed her regal features. Perhaps these humans weren't as primitive as she thought. The ship hummed softly as it soared through the void of space, leaving the chaotic battle behind. Inside, the tension was palpable. Captain Daniel Reyes leaned against the control console, taking in the surreal events of the past hour. They had done the impossible, rescued Princess Zerona from a fortress designed to be impenetrable. But the victory tasted less sweet with the storm brewing inside the cabin. Zerona stood near the viewport, her posture rigid and her violet eyes glaring at the stars. The regal gown she wore, now tattered and stained, did little to diminish her aura of authority. When she finally spoke, her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "You, human," she began, turning to face Reyes with a withering gaze. "Explain yourself." Reyes raised an eyebrow, suppressing a groan. "Explain what, Your Highness?" "Saving your life." "Saving?" Zerona's tone dripped with indignation. "You call that barbaric display a rescue? Grabbing me like some common object? Do you have any idea what you've done?" Reyes folded his arms, his patience thinning. "Yeah, I pulled you out of a death trap. You're welcome." Zerona took a step closer, her silvery hair catching the dim cabin lights. "You violated centuries of Zelthar customs. No commoner, let alone a human, is permitted to touch royalty. Such insolence is punishable by exile, or worse." Reyes let out a humorless laugh. "Lady, with all due respect, you were about to be vaporized by whoever wanted you locked up in that fortress. Forgive me if I didn't pause to check the royal rulebook." Harper, still manning the controls, snorted quietly but quickly disguised it as a cough. The rest of the crew exchanged wary glances, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating argument. Zerona's gaze narrowed, but instead of retaliating, she simply exhaled sharply and turned away. "Typical human arrogance," she muttered, charging in with no regard for protocol or consequences. Reyes stepped closer, his tone softening just enough to make her pause. "Look, I get it. You're used to people bowing and scraping. But out here, in the real world, survival doesn't care about protocol. I did what I had to do to keep you alive. End of story." For a moment, Zerona said nothing, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to the viewport, her voice quieter this time. "You speak of survival as if it were a choice. For my people, survival is an expectation, a duty. And you've just made it far more complicated." Reyes frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before Zerona could answer, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared, and Harper's voice rose above the chaos. "Captain, we've got incoming. Unidentified vessels on an intercept course." Reyes snapped into action. Evasive maneuvers. "Vega, man the rear cannons. Harper, give me a visual." The main screen flickered to life, displaying 3 sleek, angular ships closing in fast. Their dark hulls shimmered with an otherworldly glow, marking them as advanced alien tech. Reyes didn't recognize the design, but their intentions were clear. "They're targeting our engines," Harper warned. Reyes cursed under his breath. "Figures. Hold them off as long as you can." Zerona stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she studied the ships. "Those are Drakkar vessels," she said, her voice suddenly calm. "They're mercenaries, hired guns with no allegiance but to credits. Whoever hired them wants me dead. Great, Reyes muttered. Any suggestions, Your Highness? Or should I just keep being the barbaric human and handle this myself? Sirona's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Almost. If you're as capable as you claim, then prove it. Get us out of this alive, and I might consider revising my opinion of your species. Challenge accepted, Reyes said, his grin returning. The ship rocked again as plasma bolts streaked past the viewport. Reyes took his seat, barking orders while his crew scrambled to keep the ship intact. Vega returned fire with the rear cannons, scoring a lucky hit on one of the pursuing ships. Direct hit, Vega shouted. 1 down, 2 to go. Keep it up, Reyes said. He glanced at Sirona, who had taken a seat nearby, her composure unshaken despite the chaos. You don't seem too worried. Worry is a waste of energy, she replied. Besides, if we die, at least I won't have to endure your presence any longer. Reyes chuckled despite himself. I'll take that as a vote of confidence. The battle raged on, the ship dodging and weaving through enemy fire. Harper managed to divert power to the shields, giving them a fighting chance. Reyes's focus never wavered, his hands flying over the controls with practiced precision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last enemy ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The cabin fell silent, save for the hum of the ship's engines. We're clear, Harper announced, her voice tinged with relief. Reyes leaned back in his seat, exhaling deeply. Good work, team. Sirona stood, her gaze meeting Reyes's. For the first time, her expression softened, though her tone remained formal. Perhaps I misjudged you, Captain. You're reckless, but effective. I'll take that as a compliment, Reyes said with a smirk. Sirona inclined her head slightly, a gesture that almost resembled respect. But as she returned to her seat, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of their troubles. The jungle was alive. The sounds of alien wildlife echoed through the dense canopy, an eerie symphony of clicks, howls, and distant roars. The ship had crash-landed in a tangled web of vines and towering trees after taking heavy damage from the Drakkar mercenaries. Smoke hissed from the cracked hull, mixing with the humid, electric air of the uncharted planet. Captain Daniel Reyes pulled himself to his feet, wincing as he stretched a bruised shoulder. Around him, the crew was regaining their bearings. Harper checked her equipment while Vega scanned the perimeter with his weapon drawn. Princess Sirona, however, stood apart, her expression unreadable as she observed their chaotic surroundings. Status? Reyes asked, brushing dirt off his jacket. Harper grimaced. Engines are shot. Comms are down. We're stuck until I can make some serious repairs. Great, Reyes muttered, glancing at Sirona. Your Highness, welcome to our luxurious accommodations. Try not to complain too much. Sirona didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she knelt and touched the soil, her elegant fingers brushing the ground as if feeling for something unseen. A faint glow pulsed beneath her touch, and her eyes narrowed. We're not alone, she said quietly. Reyes frowned. What do you mean? This planet, Sirona replied, rising to her feet, is alive. It's watching us. Reyes opened his mouth to retort, but a sudden rustling in the underbrush silenced him. Vega's weapon was up in an instant, his sharp eyes scanning the tree line. Movement, Vega whispered. We've got company. Reyes motioned for silence, his instincts on high alert. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, the ambient noise fading into an unsettling stillness. Then, without warning, a massive shadow darted through the foliage, too fast for the eye to follow. Harper, stay close to the princess, Reyes ordered, raising his own weapon. Vega, flank left. The shadow moved again, circling them. It wasn't alone. More figures began to emerge, their forms obscured by the dense vegetation. Eyes glinted in the darkness, too many to count. They're surrounding us, Harper whispered, clutching her sidearm. Reyes's voice was steady. Hold your ground. Don't fire, unless I say so. The creatures finally revealed themselves, stepping into the dim light filtering through the canopy. They were insectoid and reptilian all at once. Massive, armored beings with razor-sharp claws and elongated jaws. Their bodies shimmered with an unnatural luminescence, as if reflecting the jungle itself. One of them let out a guttural hiss, and the others responded in kind, their sounds vibrating the very air around them. They were communicating. Suggestions? Rise asked, heaping his weapon trained on the closest creature. Sirona stepped forward, ignoring his warning look. She raised a hand, her voice calm and authoritative. I am Princess Sirona of the Zelfar Empire. I mean you no harm. The creatures didn't react. Their glowing eyes locked onto her. One of them tilted its head, almost as if studying her. I don't think they care about titles, Vega muttered, his finger hovering over the trigger. Suddenly, the lead creature lunged, not toward Sirona, but toward Reyes. Instinct took over, and Rice fired, the plasma bolt striking the creature's chest. It stumbled back with a screech, its companions hissing in rage. All right, that's our cue to run, Rice shouted. The team broke into a sprint, weaving through the jungle as the creatures gave chase. The ground was uneven, the thick roots and vines threatening to trip them at every step. Harper clutched a makeshift map on her datapad, trying to guide them toward higher ground. This way, she yelled, veering to the right. Reyes and Vega fired sporadically, slowing their pursuers but not stopping them. Sirona ran alongside Reyes, her breath controlled despite the chaos. They're not just hunting us, she said, her voice steady. They're testing us. Not the best time for a biology lesson. Reyes snapped, dodging a swipe from one of the creatures. Ahead, the jungle opened up to reveal a cliffside with a narrow path leading up. Harper gestured frantically. There's a cave up there. It's our best shot. The team scrambled up the path, the creatures close behind. Plasma bolts and alien hisses filled the air, but they managed to reach the cave just in time. Vega lobbed a small explosive device, sealing the entrance with a deafening blast. The silence that followed was almost as unnerving as the chase. The team collapsed onto the cave floor, catching their breath. The faint sound of scratching outside reminded them that their reprieve was only temporary. Reyes turned to Sirona, his expression grim. What did you mean earlier about them testing us? Sirona hesitated, then sighed. This planet, it's ancient, sacred. The creatures here are its guardians, designed to protect its secrets. They sense the artifact I carry. Reyes's eyes narrowed. You knew this would happen. I suspected, Sirona admitted, but I didn't expect them to be so aggressive. Reyes stood, pacing the small space. So we're stuck on a living planet, hunted by its guardians, because of that thing you're carrying. Fantastic. Sirona met his gaze, her tone softer than before. I didn't ask for your help, Captain. But now that we're here, we must survive together. The artifact may hold the key to saving us. Reyes sighed, running a hand through his hair. Great. Another puzzle piece to this nightmare. The scratching outside grew louder, and the faint glow of the creature's eyes became visible through the cracks in the rock. Let's hope your key works fast, Reyes muttered, gripping his weapon as the team prepared for another fight. The cave was dark, its walls lined with crystalline veins that pulsed faintly, as though alive. The soft glow provided just enough light to see the exhausted expressions of the crew. Captain Daniel Reyes crouched near the entrance, weapon ready, listening intently for any sign that the alien predators outside were regrouping. Princess Sirona stood in the center of the cave, her violet eyes fixed on the artifact clutched in her hands. It was a small, unassuming orb, its surface etched with glowing, interlocking patterns that seemed to shift when touched. Reyes had seen alien tech before, but nothing like this. The artifact felt sentient. You've been holding out on us, Reyes said, breaking the tense silence. His tone wasn't accusatory, but edged with frustration. That thing isn't just some royal trinket, is it? Sirona's fingers tightened around the orb. She didn't look up. "It's more than you can comprehend, Captain." "Try me," Rise replied, standing. His voice carried a hint of challenge. "Because right now, my team's risking their lives for something we don't understand. I think we deserve answers." Sirona sighed, her regal demeanor softening. For the first time since their chaotic meeting, she seemed vulnerable. "This artifact," she began, her voice steady but tinged with weariness, "is called the core of Elithar. It's an ancient relic from a long-forgotten civilization. My people believe it holds the power to reshape worlds." Rais folded his arms. "Reshape how?" "Like terraforming. Not just the land." Sirona said, her gaze meeting his. "The core has the ability to rewrite matter itself. It can heal a dying planet, but it can also destroy it. Its power is limitless and dangerous." The weight of her words hung in the air. Harper, who had been tinkering with her damaged equipment, looked up, her expression a mix of awe and apprehension. "You're saying this thing could wipe out entire civilizations?" Sirona nodded solemnly. "Which is why it must remain hidden. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences would be catastrophic." Vega, who had been silent until now, let out a low whistle. "No wonder the Drakkar were after you. Someone paid them big to get their hands on that thing." Rais rubbed his temples, trying to process the revelation. "Let me guess," he said, his voice heavy with sarcasm. "You didn't think to mention this before we stormed that fortress." "I couldn't risk it," Sirona replied, her tone firm. "The more you knew, the more danger you would have been in." Rais laughed bitterly. "Lady, we're already neck-deep in danger. Knowing why might have helped us prepare." Before Sirona could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cave. The ground beneath them trembled, and the crystalline veins on the walls glowed brighter. Harper's datapad crackled with interference, displaying erratic energy readings. "What now?" Vega muttered, gripping his weapon. Sirona's eyes widened. "The core is reacting to the planet." "Reacting how?" Rais demanded. Sirona hesitated, then said, "The core is tied to Elithar's legacy. It responds to places of power, ancient sites connected to its creators. This planet must be one of those places." The cave trembled again, and a section of the wall collapsed, revealing the hidden passageway. The faint sound of rushing water echoed from within, accompanied by a strange melodic hum. Rais exchanged a wary glance with Sirona. "I'm guessing we don't have a choice." Sirona nodded. "The core is guiding us. If we follow, we may find answers, or a way to escape, or a trap." Vega muttered under his breath. Rais sighed. "Harper, stay close. Vega, you're on point. Let's move." The team ventured into the passageway, the hum growing louder with each step. The walls glowed brighter, illuminating intricate carvings that told a story of a civilization long gone. The images depicted towering beings wielding the core to create lush worlds, only to succumb to greed and turn its power against one another. "This is a warning," Sirona said softly, running her fingers over the carvings. "The core's creators destroyed themselves with its power. It's a reminder of what could happen if we fail." The passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. In the center stood a massive pedestal, bathed in a beam of light from above. Surrounding it were statues of the ancient beings, their faces solemn and their hands outstretched, as if offering something to the heavens. The core in Sirona's hands pulsed, its glow intensifying. She stepped forward, drawn to the pedestal, as if by an invisible force. "Wait," Rais said, grabbing her arm. "We don't know what's waiting for us in there." Sirona turned to him, her expression resolute. "This is what the core wants. If we're to survive, we must trust it." Reluctantly, Rais released her. Sirona approached the pedestal, placing the core in its center. The moment it touched the stone, the chamber came alive. Light filled the room, and the statues began to move, their stony faces cracking to reveal glowing eyes. "They're activating," Harper shouted, scrambling for her weapon. "Hold your fire," Rise ordered. "Let's see what they do." The statues turned toward Sirona, their voices resonating in unison. "Bearer of the core, you have awakened the guardians of Elithar. Speak your purpose." Sirona took a deep breath, her voice steady. "I seek guidance. The core is threatened by forces who would misuse it. Show me how to protect it." The statues were silent for a moment, then one of them stepped forward, extending a hand. From its palm emerged a holographic map, displaying a network of planets and ancient sites connected to Elithar's legacy. "This knowledge is yours," the statue said. "But beware, activating the core comes with a cost." "What cost?" Rise demanded, stepping forward. The statue turned to him, its glowing eyes piercing. "The core requires balance. To save, something must be sacrificed. Choose wisely." The light dimmed, and the statues returned to their dormant state. The map lingered for a moment before vanishing, leaving the team in stunned silence. Rise turned to Sirona. "So, what's the plan?" Sirona picked up the core, her expression unreadable. "We find the next site, and pray the cost isn't more than we can bear." The trek through the dense jungle was relentless. With the map from the statues now etched into Harper's datapad, the team had a clear direction, but no clear path. Vines as thick as a man's arm hung like veils from ancient trees, and the ground squelched beneath their boots with every step. The air was heavy, each breath tasting of damp earth and an undercurrent of something electric, like a storm waiting to break. "Remind me again," Vega grunted as he hacked at a vine with his blade. "Why we're following a glowing rock's instructions into who knows where." "Because glowing rocks tend to be smarter than soldiers with knives," Harper shot back, earning a snicker from Reyes. "Focus," Reyes said, though his tone was less sharp than usual. His attention was split between the jungle around them and the weight of the core's warning. The cost. What could it mean? And why hadn't Sirona offered more clarity? Sirona, walking slightly ahead of the group, seemed unaffected by the physical strain. Her silvery hair shimmered faintly in the filtered light, and her regal posture remained impeccable despite the jungle's oppressive heat. Rise watched her closely, noting the way she held the core protectively, almost reverently. "Mind sharing what's on your mind, Princess?" Rise asked, breaking the silence. Sirona didn't look back. "You wouldn't understand." Rise smirked. "Try me. I'm smarter than I look." Finally, she stopped, turning to face him. "Do you think I carry this burden lightly? Do you think I'd wanted any of this?" Rise blinked, caught off guard by the raw emotion in her voice. "I didn't say that." "But you think it," she said, stepping closer. "You see me as some spoiled royal, sheltered and out of touch. You can't fathom what it's like to carry the weight of an entire civilization's survival." Rise met her gaze, his own expression softening. "You're right. I can't. But out here, it's not just your survival at stake. It's all of ours. So maybe stop shutting us out and let us help." Sirona hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Very well. But understand this. Helping me means accepting the risks. The core's power comes with consequences, and not all of them are mine to bear." Before Rais could respond, Harper called out, Guys, you might want to see this." The group hurried forward to find Harper standing at the edge of a massive clearing. In the center was a towering structure, part temple, part machine, its surface covered in the same glowing patterns as the core. The jungle seemed to recede from it, as though the very earth respected its presence. "That's our destination," Sirona said, her voice filled with quiet reverence. "Of course it is," Vega muttered, nothing ominous about a glowing alien temple in the middle of nowhere. As they approached, the air grew colder, and the hum from the temple resonated through the ground. The entrance was a massive archway, guarded by two statues identical to the ones in the cave. When Sirona stepped closer, the statues came to life. their stone forms cracking to reveal glowing interiors. "Bearer of the core," one of them intoned, its voice deep and resonant. "Your presence is acknowledged. Do you wish to proceed?" Sirona stood tall. "I do." The second statue tilted its head slightly. "Then know this. The balance must be upheld. What is given will be taken." "What's that supposed to mean?" Rise asked, stepping forward. The statues didn't respond. Instead, they turned and walked into the temple, the ground trembling with each step. The team followed, entering a vast chamber filled with machinery that hummed with ancient energy. Pillars of light shot upward, connecting to a ceiling shrouded in mist. At the center of the room was a pedestal, similar to the one in the cave, but larger and more intricate. Symbols shifted across its surface, forming patterns that seemed to pulse in time with the core. Sirona placed the core on the pedestal, and the room erupted with light. The patterns spread outward, filling the chamber and illuminating massive murals on the walls. They depicted scenes of creation and destruction, harmony and chaos. One mural caught Reyes's eye, a lone figure standing before a collapsing planet, the core in their hands. "That doesn't look encouraging," he muttered. Sirona approached the mural, her expression grim. "This is the price. The core can save, but its power must be balanced. A life for a life, a world for a world." Reyes stared at her. "You knew this." She nodded. "It's why my people sealed it away. We couldn't risk its use unless there was no other choice." "Great," Vega said, throwing up his hands. "So what happens if we use it here?" Before Sirona could answer, the room shook violently. The light from the core flared, and a deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber. "The balance is threatened. Choose now, bearer of the core. Who will pay the price?" "What does it mean, choose?" Reyes demanded. Sirona turned to him, her eyes filled with regret. "It means one of us must sacrifice ourselves. The core requires balance to activate its power." Silence fell over the group, the weight of her words sinking in. Each of them realized what was being asked, and the impossible decision ahead. The chamber quaked as the voice of the core echoed through the air, resonating in their very bones. "Balance must be restored. Choose now, bearer of the core. Who will pay the price?" The team froze, the weight of the ultimatum suffocating. The glowing murals on the walls depicted cycles of sacrifice, beings stepping forward, offering their lives to maintain the balance. The core pulsed ominously on the pedestal, its patterns shifting with urgency. "No," Captain Reyes said firmly, stepping forward. "There has to be another way." "There is no other way," Sirona replied, her voice a mix of sorrow and resignation. She met Reyes's eyes, her regal composure cracking. "The core demands a life to balance its power. It's always been this way." Reyes paced, his mind racing. He wasn't the type to accept no-win scenarios, but the gravity of the situation weighed heavily. His crew, his family, was looking to him for answers, and the alien princess, though proud and aloof, now seemed more vulnerable than ever. "Let me get this straight," Vega said, breaking the silence. "One of us has to die so this glowing rock can do its thing." "That's insane. It's not just about death," Sirona said, her tone sharp but laced with pain. "It's about balance. The core is tied to the fabric of existence. Without sacrifice, its power would destabilize everything." Harper, normally calm under pressure, finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "But what happens if we don't use it? What happens if we just walk away?" Sirona looked at her, the glow of the core reflecting in her violet eyes. "If we leave, the imbalance will spread. This planet will collapse, taking us, and potentially nearby systems, with it." The silence that followed was deafening. Each member of the team grappled with the impossible choice before them. Then the chamber trembled again, more violently this time. The core's light intensified, and the voice returned, louder and more urgent. "The balance must be restored. Delay will result in destruction. "Captain," Vega said, his voice low. "We're out of time." Reyes clenched his fists, his mind churning. Then, to everyone's shock, Sirona stepped toward the core, her head held high. "I will pay the price," she said, her voice steady. "No," Reyes said immediately, moving to block her path. "That's not happening." "This is my burden," Sirona replied, her tone firm. "The core is my people's legacy. It's only fitting that I—" "Enough," Reyes snapped, his voice echoing through the chamber. He took a deep breath, then turned to the group. "Nobody's sacrificing themselves. We're getting out of this together." "And how do you plan to do that?" Vega asked, his tone skeptical. Reyes didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied the murals, his eyes scanning the intricate carvings for clues. Something about the cycles depicted, creation and destruction, harmony and chaos, nagged at him. Then it hit him. "It's not just about death," Reyes said slowly, piecing it together. "It's about balance. The core doesn't just take, it gives. Maybe we don't have to lose anyone." Sirona frowned. "What are you suggesting?" Reyes pointed to a mural showing a figure surrounded by light, their form transforming. "What if the core doesn't need a death, but a transformation? A shift in the balance of what we are?" "That's a big gamble," Harper said, her voice filled with doubt. "And if you're wrong?" Reyes smirked faintly. "Then I guess I'll owe you all an apology in the afterlife." Before anyone could protest, Reyes stepped forward, placing his hand on the core. Its surface was cool to the touch, but he felt its energy coursing through him, ancient and overwhelming. The patterns shifted wildly, reacting to his presence. "Captain, wait!" Sirona shouted, reaching for him, but it was too late. The core flared, engulfing Reyes in a column of light. He gasped as the energy surged through him, filling every cell of his body. Memories flashed before his eyes. His childhood, his days as a young recruit, the faces of those he'd saved and lost. He saw himself as he was, and as he could be, a being redefined by the core's power. The light began to dim, and Reyes collapsed to his knees. The room was silent except for his ragged breathing. Harper and Vega rushed to his side, while Sirona stood frozen, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Reyes," Harper said softly, "are you okay?" Reyes opened his eyes, and they glowed faintly with the same light as the core. I think I'm fine," he said, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Better than fine, actually." The core had changed him, but he was still himself, only stronger, more connected to the energy around him. The murals on the walls shifted, their glowing patterns stabilizing. The room stopped trembling, and the oppressive tension lifted. "The balance is restored," the voice of the core declared. "Bearer, you have chosen transformation over sacrifice. The cycle is complete." Sirona approached him cautiously, her regal demeanor returning. You risked everything." Reyes managed a weak smile. "It's kind of my thing." She extended a hand, helping him to his feet. "You've proven yourself, Captain. Perhaps humans are more than I gave them credit for." Reyes chuckled, brushing himself off. "I'll take that as a compliment." The team exited the chamber, the core now dormant, but no less mysterious. The jungle seemed quieter, less hostile, as if acknowledging the balance had been restored. For the first time since their journey began, the air felt lighter. But as they made their way back to the ship, Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure with the core was only the beginning. The journey back to the ship was a surreal mix of relief and exhaustion. The jungle seemed quieter now, its menacing hum replaced by a calm stillness. The creatures that had once hunted them were nowhere to be seen, as if the restoration of balance had quelled their fury. Captain Daniel Reyes walked at the front of the group, his steps steady despite the strange new energy coursing through him. The transformation from the core had left its mark, not just on his body, but on his very essence. His eyes still glowed faintly, a reminder of the power he had absorbed. Behind him, Princess Sirona followed, her usual regal poise softened by a look of quiet contemplation. She hadn't spoken much since they left the ancient temple, and her gaze lingered on Reyes more often than not. Harper and Vega brought up the rear, their hushed voices exchanging theories about what had just happened. "Captain," Sirona finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was measured but tinged with something uncharacteristic: vulnerability. "What you did back there was reckless." Reyes glanced over his shoulder, smirking. "You're welcome." She frowned, quickening her pace to walk beside him. "I'm serious. The Core's power isn't meant for mortals. You've taken on a burden you can't fully understand. And what was my alternative?" Reyes shot back, his tone sharper than intended. "Let one of us die. Watch this planet collapse and take us with it. No thanks." Sirona hesitated, then sighed. "You've changed, Captain. You may not feel it yet, but the Core has altered more than your physical state. It's connected to you now, tied to your very existence." Reyes stopped walking, turning to face her. "What's your point?" Her violet eyes searched his, her expression a mixture of regret and admiration. "My point is that you've sacrificed part of yourself for something that wasn't your responsibility. You didn't have to do it, and yet you did. Why?" Reyes's smirk faded, replaced by a rare seriousness. "Because that's what leaders do. You make the hard calls, even when they're not fair, even when they cost you." For a moment, Sirona said nothing, her gaze dropping to the ground. When she finally looked up, her voice was softer. "Then perhaps I've misjudged you, and your people. Your actions today were extraordinary." Reyes shrugged, trying to downplay the moment. "Extraordinary is just another Tuesday for me." Before Sirona could respond, Vega's voice called out from behind. "Captain, we've got a problem." Reyes turned to see Vega pointing toward the horizon. Dark clouds were gathering, and the ground beneath them trembled faintly. Harper checked her datapad, her face pale as she read the readings. "This planet's still unstable," she said. "The Core fixed the balance temporarily, but the ecosystem's been damaged for too long. We need to leave now." The urgency in her voice snapped everyone into action. The team broke into a run, navigating the dense jungle as quickly as they could. The trembling grew stronger, and fissures began to open in the ground, releasing bursts of luminous gas. When they reached the ship, Reyes wasted no time. "Harper, get us in the air. Vega, prep the weapons in case anything follows us." The crew scrambled aboard, and the engines roared to life. Harper's hands flew over the controls, and the ship lifted off just as a massive crack split the earth beneath them. The jungle below was consumed by chaos, trees toppling and rivers of molten light cutting through the terrain. "Punch it, Harper," Reyes shouted. The ship shot upward, breaking through the atmosphere and into the safety of space. For a moment, the crew sat in silence, watching the planet below as it stabilized, its surface glowing faintly from the Core's influence. "We made it," Vega said, exhaling deeply. "Barely," Harper added, though a small smile played on her lips. Reyes leaned back in his chair, the tension in his shoulders easing, but his mind was far from at rest. The transformation he had undergone still gnawed at him. The Core's power and ever-present weight. Sirona approached him, her expression thoughtful. "Captain, you've done more today than anyone could have asked. You've proven that humanity is capable of greatness." Reyes glanced at her, his smirk returning. "Careful, princess. Keep complimenting me, and I might start thinking you like me." She raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Don't let it go to your head." As the ship's crew settled in, Sirona turned to the viewport, her gaze fixed on the stars. "The Core's power may have been stabilized, but it's far from safe. There are others out there, others who would seek to control it." Reyes joined her, his arms crossed. "Let them try. They'll have to go through us first." Sirona nodded, a newfound respect evident in her eyes. "Perhaps there's more to humanity than I ever imagined. And maybe there's more to you than just a title," Rise replied, his tone lighter but sincere. The ship sailed through the vast expanse of space, leaving the chaos of the jungle planet behind. But as they ventured into the unknown, one thing was clear. Their journey was far from over. The Corps' legacy was a heavy burden, but together they had proven they could carry it. And for the first time in a long time, Princess Sterona felt something she thought she had lost.